the
The rain
Future
hit the
Builders
windshield
Foundation,
like
our core
bullets,
mission is
each
to
drop a
empower
reminder of
communities
how
by
far
investing in
David Chen
sustainable
had
development
fallen.
projects
His
that create
10-year-old
lasting
Honda Civic
impact.
sputtered to a stop in the parking lot of Sunset Storage, its engine finally giving up after months of borrowed time. In the passenger seat, 7-year-old Emma stirred from her restless sleep, her small hand clutching a worn teddy bear that had seen better days. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice hoarse from the cold that had been getting worse all week. "Are we home?" David's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. Home. The word felt like a cruel joke. 3 hours ago, they'd been evicted from their studio apartment, the third place they'd lost in 6 months. The landlord's words still echoed in his mind. "I'm sorry, Mr. Chen, but you're 2 months behind. I can't wait any longer." "Not yet, sweetheart," David managed, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "We're just taking a little break." Emma coughed, a deep rattling sound that sent panic shooting through David's chest. She'd been sick for days, but he couldn't afford to take her to a doctor. The last of their money had gone to gas and a box of crackers they'd shared for dinner. His pride had already taken so many hits, calling in sick to his night shift at Murphy's garage because Emma was too sick to leave alone, borrowing money from coworkers who barely knew his name, watching other parents at Emma's school pick up their children in warm cars while he waited at the bus stop with holes in his shoes. "I'm cold, Daddy," Emma murmured, pulling her thin jacket tighter around her small frame. David reached over and wrapped his arms around his daughter, pulling her close. She felt so fragile, like a bird with broken wings. Her fever was getting worse. He could feel the heat radiating from her small body, even through her clothes. "I know, baby girl, I know." He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair despite everything. "Tell you what, let's play the imagination game, remember? Close your eyes and tell me about our dream house." Emma's eyes fluttered shut, and for a moment, the only sound was the rain drumming against the car roof and her labored breathing. "It has a big kitchen," she whispered, "with a table where we can eat pancakes every morning, and my room has pink walls and a window where I can watch the birds." "That sounds perfect," David said, his throat tight. "What else?" "And you have your own workshop where you can fix cars, but you come home every night for dinner. And," she paused, coughing again, "and maybe there's someone who makes us soup when we're sick." The innocence in her voice, the simple wish for someone to take care of them, nearly broke him. Emma had never asked for toys or expensive clothes. She only wanted a stable home and someone to love them both. At 7 years old, she'd already learned not to ask for too much, and that realization cut David deeper than any eviction notice ever could. Lightning illuminated the storage facility around them, rows of metal units where people kept the pieces of lives they couldn't fit anywhere else. Soon, David thought grimly, they might be sleeping in one of those units, if they were lucky. His phone buzzed with a text from his supervisor at Murphy's garage. "Dave, I know you're going through a tough time, but I need reliability. If you can't make your shifts, I'll have to let you go." David stared at the message, his hands trembling. The job at Murphy's was the only thing standing between them and complete destitution. It paid barely above minimum wage, but it was something. Without it, "Daddy, your heart is beating really fast," Emma said softly, her small hand pressed against his chest. He forced himself to breathe, to calm down. Emma was already scared enough without seeing him fall apart. "Sorry, sweetheart. I was just thinking about the bad men who made us leave." No, I was thinking about tomorrow, about how we're going to find an even better place to live." It was a lie, and they both knew it. David had been telling Emma that things would get better for months now, but they only seemed to get worse. His ex-wife Sarah had left when Emma was 3, unable to handle what she called his lack of ambition. She'd wanted a man who could provide stability, security, a future. Instead, she'd gotten David, a community college dropout who bounced between dead-end jobs and could barely keep the lights on. "Daddy," Emma said suddenly, sitting up straighter. "Look." David followed her gaze to see an elderly man struggling with a heavy box outside one of the storage units. The man slipped on the wet pavement, and the box went flying, its contents scattering across the ground. Without thinking, David opened the car door. "Stay here, Em. I'll be right back." He jogged through the rain to where the man was trying to gather what looked like old photographs and documents. David knelt down beside him, helping to collect the scattered papers. "Thank you, son," the old man said, his voice shaky. "These are pictures of my late wife. I can't afford to store everything anymore, so I was just trying to decide what to keep." David's chest tightened. Here was someone else facing impossible choices, trying to hold on to pieces of a life that was slipping away. "Here, let me help you get these somewhere dry." Together, they carried the box into the storage unit. It was crammed with furniture, boxes of memories, a lifetime of possessions reduced to a 10 by 10 metal box. The old man, who introduced himself as Frank, noticed David's wet clothes and tired eyes. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world, son." David almost laughed. If only it were that simple. Just having a rough night. Frank studied him with kind eyes that had clearly seen their share of hardship. "You know, I've been around long enough to recognize when a man is at the end of his rope. Whatever you're going through, it's not the end of your story." Back in the car, Emma had fallen asleep again, her breathing still concerning, but steady. David sat in the driver's seat, Frank's words echoing in his mind. Not the end of your story. But what if he'd run out of pages? What if there was nothing left to write? He pulled out his wallet and counted the crumpled bills inside. $37. That was it. That was all that stood between his daughter and sleeping on the streets. Tomorrow, he'd have to swallow what remained of his pride and ask for help, from churches, from social services, from anyone who might listen to the desperate plea of a father who was drowning. As Emma slept fitfully beside him, David made a silent promise. Whatever it took, however far he had to fall, he would not let his daughter suffer for his failures. She deserved a father who could protect her, provide for her, give her the life she dreamed about in their imagination games. The rain continued to fall, washing away the last traces of the life they'd lost, but perhaps, just perhaps, making room for something new to grow. The alarm on David's phone buzzed at 5:30 a.m., though he'd barely slept. Emma was curled up against him in the back seat of the Honda, her fever finally broken, but her breathing still rough. They'd spent the night in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, the neon sign casting pink and blue shadows across their makeshift bed of old blankets and his work jacket. David carefully extracted himself from Emma's embrace, trying not to wake her. She needed every minute of rest she could get. He'd called in sick to Murphy's garage again last night, the third time in 2 weeks, knowing full well it might cost him his job. But what choice did he have? Emma was sick, they had nowhere to go, and the temperature had dropped to near freezing. He stepped out into the crisp morning air and stretched his aching back. Sleeping in cars wasn't something a 35-year-old body was designed for, but it was better than the alternative. Through the diner's windows, he could see the early morning crowd, truckers grabbing coffee before long hauls, night shift workers ending their day, people with homes to go to and warm beds waiting for them. His phone rang. Murphy's garage. "Dave?" The voice belonged to Tony Murphy, the gruff owner who'd given David a chance when no one else would. "Where the hell are you? I've got 3 cars backed up and Jenkins called in with the flu." David closed his eyes. "Tony, I'm sorry. My daughter's been sick and Look, kid, I get it. Being a single dad is tough, but I'm running a business here, not a charity. You've missed more shifts this month than some guys miss all year." I know. Just give me 2 hours to find someone to watch Emma, and I'll be there. I'll work a double. I'll do whatever you need." There was a long pause. David could hear the sounds of the garage in the background, air tools hissing, engines revving, the familiar symphony of his trade. It was the one thing he was actually good at. Cars made sense to him in a way that life never seemed to. 2 hours, Tony said finally. "And Dave, this is your last warning. I like you, but I can't carry dead weight." The line went dead. David stared at his phone, feeling the familiar weight of failure settling on his shoulders. Dead weight. That's what he'd become, to his ex-wife, to his employers, to everyone who'd ever tried to help him. The only person who still believed in him was sleeping in the back seat of a car that barely ran. He opened the car door quietly and watched Emma sleep. She looked so peaceful now that her fever had broken. Her dark hair spread across the makeshift pillow of his work shirts. 7 years old, and she'd already seen more hardship than most adults. She'd never complained, never asked why they had to move so often, or why Daddy couldn't buy her the toys other kids had. She just trusted him to take care of her, and that trust was both his greatest motivation and his deepest source of shame. Emma stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Daddy, where are we?" "Good morning, sweetheart. How are you feeling?" She sat up slowly, touching her forehead with the back of her hand, the way she'd seen him do when checking for fever. "Better, I think. My throat doesn't hurt as much." "That's my brave girl." David reached over and felt her forehead. Still warm, but not burning like last night. "Are you hungry?" Emma nodded, then seemed to remember their situation. Her shoulders sagged slightly. "But we don't have much money left, do we?" The fact that a 7-year-old had to worry about money made David's heart ache. "Don't you worry about that. Daddy's got it handled." He walked into the diner, leaving Emma in the car where she could stay warm. The waitress, a tired-looking woman named Dolores with kind eyes and worn hands, looked up from wiping down tables. "Coffee, hon?" "Actually," David said, pulling out his wallet, "could I get a kid's meal to go, and maybe just a cup of coffee for me?" Dolores studied him for a moment, her experienced eyes taking in his rumpled clothes, the exhaustion written across his face, the way he counted the bills in his wallet twice before ordering. "The kid's meal comes with chocolate milk and apple slices. That okay?" "Perfect, thank you." While he waited, David's mind raced through his options. He had exactly $31 left after buying Emma's breakfast. The storage unit where they had parked last night had a posted rate of $40 a night for vehicle parking. Most motels in the area were $60 or $70, money he simply didn't have. His next paycheck from Murphy's wouldn't come for another week, assuming he still had a job by then. "Here you go, sweetheart." Dolores handed him the bag and coffee. "And I threw in an extra cookie. Growing kids need their energy." David tried to hand her a $5 bill, but she shook her head. "Coffee's on the house. You look like you need it more than I need the 50 cents. "Thank you," David said, his voice thick with gratitude. "Really, thank you." Back in the car, he watched Emma eat her pancakes with the methodical precision of someone who'd learned not to waste food. She saved half the cookie for later, wrapping it carefully in a napkin, a habit she'd developed during their hardest months. "Daddy, are we going to find a new house today?" David sipped his coffee, buying time to formulate an answer that was hopeful but honest. "We're working on it, Em. These things take time." "I don't mind sleeping in the car," she said quietly. "It's like camping." The forced cheerfulness in her voice nearly broke him. Emma was trying to make him feel better about their situation, protecting his feelings the way he should be protecting hers. What kind of father let his 7-year-old daughter comfort him? "Tell you what," David said, starting the car. "After Daddy finishes work today, we'll go to the library. You can pick out some new books, and we can use their computers to look for apartments." Emma's face lit up. The library was one of their favorite free activities, a warm, safe place where Emma could read and David could job, hunt online, or fill out assistance applications. The librarians knew them by name now, and Mrs. Patterson in the children's section always had book recommendations for Emma. David dropped Emma off at his neighbor's apartment. Mrs. Rodriguez, an elderly woman who watched Emma for $10 a day when David could afford it. She was the only person who would take Emma on such short notice, and David suspected she often didn't charge him when he was particularly strapped for cash. "Mijo," Mrs. Rodriguez said, studying David's face. "You look terrible. When's the last time you had a real meal?" "I'm fine, Mrs. Rodriguez, just tired. I made extra rice and beans last night. Emma can have lunch here, and I'll send some home with you both." David's throat tightened. "You don't have to." "Families help families," she said firmly. No arguments. The drive to Murphy's garage took 20 minutes through morning traffic. David used the time to prepare himself mentally for what he knew would be a difficult day. Tony would be watching him closely, looking for any excuse to justify letting him go. The other mechanics, good guys mostly, but they had their own families to worry about, would give him sympathetic looks, but couldn't risk their own jobs by covering for him. Murphy's garage sat on a busy corner in an industrial part of town, surrounded by auto parts stores and fast food restaurants. It wasn't glamorous work, but David was good at it. He had an intuitive understanding of engines, could diagnose problems that stumped guys with twice his experience. If only he could apply that same problem-solving ability to his own life. "Chen!" Tony's voice boomed across the garage floor as David walked in. "About time. Bay 3 needs a transmission rebuild, and the customer's breathing down my neck about the timeline." "On it," David said, grabbing his tools. Work was the one place where he felt competent, where his hands knew what to do, even when his mind was spinning with worry. As he worked, muscle memory taking over, David allowed himself to imagine a different life. What if he could open his own shop someday? What if he could provide Emma with the stability she deserved? What if he could be the kind of father who came home to a house instead of a car, who could afford to take his daughter to the doctor when she was sick, who could give her the childhood she should have? "Dave," he looked up to see Marcus, one of the other mechanics, holding a paper bag. "My wife packed extra lunch again. You want half a sandwich?" David's pride wanted to say no, but his empty stomach had other ideas. "Thanks, man. I appreciate it." "No problem. We all been there." Had they, though? David wondered. Had any of them really been there, sleeping in cars, counting change for their child's meals, watching their 7-year-old worry about money? Or were they just being kind to the guy who'd clearly lost his way? The day passed in a blur of oil changes, brake jobs, and engine diagnostics. David worked with singular focus, partly because he loved the work and partly because staying busy kept his mind off their situation. When Tony announced closing time, David realized he'd forgotten to eat Marcus's sandwich. "Good work today," Tony said as David cleaned his tools. "This is what I need from you every day." "You'll have it," David promised. "Things are just complicated right now." Tony nodded. "Look, Dave, I know you're going through a rough patch. We've all been there. But I need reliable guys, especially heading into winter. Fix whatever's going on in your personal life, because I can't keep making excuses for you with the other employees." David picked up Emma from Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment, along with a container of rice and beans that would feed them for 2 days. Emma chattered about her day. She'd helped Mrs. Rodriguez water her plants and had drawn pictures of their imaginary house with the pink bedroom and the big kitchen. As they drove to the library, Emma suddenly asked, "Daddy, why did Mommy leave?" The question came out of nowhere, hitting David like a physical blow. Emma rarely asked about Sarah anymore. "Why are you thinking about that, sweetheart?" Mrs. Rodriguez was talking to her friend about her daughter who moved away, and they were sad because they miss her. "But I don't miss Mommy. Is that bad?" David pulled into the library parking lot and turned to face his daughter. She was staring out the window, her small face serious in a way that no 7-year-old should be. "No, Em, that's not bad at all. Sometimes people leave because they think it's what's best for everyone." "But you didn't think it was best." "No," David said honestly. "I didn't. But that doesn't mean Mommy was wrong. She just wanted different things than we did." Emma nodded solemnly. "I'm glad she left." "Emma, because now it's just us, and I like us better." David felt tears prick his eyes. Here was his daughter, choosing their broken little family over the stability her mother might have provided elsewhere, choosing him despite everything. Inside the library, they settled into their usual routine. Emma disappeared into the children's section, while David used the computers to search for apartments, jobs, assistance programs, anything that might offer a way forward. The numbers never seemed to add up. Even the cheapest studios required first month's rent, last month's rent, and a security deposit. Minimum wage jobs barely covered basic expenses, let alone savings for deposits. As they walked back to the car, arms full of library books, Emma slipped her small hand into his. "Daddy, even if we have to sleep in the car for a long time, I'm not scared, because we're together." David squeezed her hand, making a silent promise. Tomorrow, he would find a way to do better. He had to. Emma's faith in him demanded nothing less. The black BMW M8 came screaming around the corner at exactly 11:47 p.m., its engine roaring like a wounded animal. David was closing up Murphy's garage after another double shift, his body aching and his mind focused on nothing but getting back to Emma at Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment. The sound of screeching tires and the smell of burning rubber snapped him to attention, just as the luxury car veered sharply into the garage parking lot, steam pouring from under its hood. The driver's door flew open, and out stepped a woman, unlike anyone David had ever seen in this part of town. Even in the harsh fluorescent light of the garage's security lamps, she commanded attention. Tall, elegant, with dark hair pulled back and what had probably been a perfect chignon before whatever crisis had brought her here. Her tailored black suit was wrinkled, her designer heels scuffed, and there was a cut on her forehead that was bleeding slightly. "Are you open?" she called out, her voice carrying a slight accent that David couldn't quite place. "Please tell me you're open." David glanced at the closed sign, then back at the woman. Every instinct told him to explain that they were closed, give her directions to the nearest 24-hour service station, and go home to his daughter. But something in her voice, desperation masquerading as authority, made him hesitate. "Depends on what you need," he said, walking closer to the BMW. The hood was still steaming, and he could hear the telltale tick of an overheated engine. "What happened?" "I don't know," she said, running a hand through her disheveled hair. "I was driving, and suddenly there was smoke everywhere, and the temperature gauge went crazy and—" She stopped abruptly, seeming to collect herself. "I'm sorry, I'm not usually so scattered. Can you help me?" David popped the hood and immediately saw the problem. "Your radiator hose blew. Probably been leaking for a while, but you lost all your coolant tonight. Engine's running hot enough to fry an egg." The woman moved to stand beside him, and David caught a whiff of expensive perfume mixed with fear sweat. "Is it bad?" "Could be worse. If you'd kept driving, you would have seized the engine completely. That would have been a $20,000 mistake instead of a $200 fix." She sagged with relief. "Thank God. Can you fix it tonight?" David checked his watch. Emma would be wondering where he was, and Mrs. Rodriguez charged extra for late pickups. But this woman was clearly in some kind of trouble, and $200 would go a long way toward getting them out of the Honda. "I can patch it for now, get you roadworthy, but you'll need a proper replacement within a few days. Whatever it costs, money isn't—" She paused, studying David's face in the light. "You're very kind to help me this late." As David gathered his tools, he found himself stealing glances at the woman. She was pacing back and forth, her phone pressed to her ear, speaking in rapid Spanish. From what he could make out, she was explaining to someone that she was fine, that she'd been in a minor accident but wasn't hurt seriously. "No, Miguel, I don't need you to come get me," she was saying. "I said I'm fine, because I can handle this myself. I don't care what the board thinks." She hung up and immediately dialed another number. "Patricia, it's me. No, I'm not coming home tonight, because something came up. I don't have to explain myself to you or anyone else." David pretended to focus on the radiator hose, but he couldn't help noticing the tension in her voice. Whoever she was running from something, or someone. "Excuse me," she said, approaching the car again. "I never asked your name." David Chen. "I'm Sofia Martinez." She extended her hand, and David noticed her grip was firm, despite the slight tremor in her fingers. "Thank you for helping me, David. Not everyone would stop their evening for a stranger." "Not a problem, though I have to ask, what were you doing driving through this neighborhood at midnight? This isn't exactly the scenic route to anywhere." Sophia's smile faltered for just a moment. "I was taking the long way home. Sometimes I need to clear my head." It was obviously a lie, but David didn't press. Everyone had their secrets. He'd learned that much in 35 years of life. As he worked on the radiator hose, David became aware that Sophia was watching him intently. Not in a flirtatious way, but with the focused attention of someone trying to solve a puzzle. "You're very good at this," she observed. "How long have you been a mechanic?" "Since I was 17. Started working on cars with my dad before that." David didn't mention that his father had walked out when David was 15, leaving behind only a toolbox and a stack of unpaid bills. Some stories were too complicated for midnight conversations with strangers. "Do you own this place?" David laughed, the sound bitter in the night air. "God, no. I work for Tony Murphy. He owns it. But you're here alone. He trusts you with his business." "Tony's got a sick kid at home. Someone had to close up." David tightened the clamp on the temporary hose. "This should hold you for a few days, but you really need to get it properly fixed." Sophia nodded, then hesitated. "David, can I ask you something? Do you have children?" The question caught him off guard. "A daughter, Emma. She's 7. Is she Is she waiting for you at home? David's hand stilled on his tools. There was something in Sophia's voice, a longing that he recognized from his own darkest moments. She's at a neighbor's. I work late most nights. That must be hard, being away from her. It is. David closed the hood and started cleaning his hands on an oil rag. But we do what we have to do. Sophia was quiet for a long moment, staring at the garage around them, the oil stains on the concrete, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, the worn tools that David had organized with obvious care. My father used to bring me to places like this when I was little, she said suddenly. He said real work happened in garages and construction sites, not in boardrooms. He said you could judge a man's character by how he treated his tools. David looked down at his hands, permanently stained with grease despite his best efforts. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was. Sophia's voice grew soft. He died when I was 12. Heart attack at 48. Too much stress, the doctors said. I'm sorry. He built everything from nothing. Came here from Mexico with $30 and a dream. By the time he died, he owned half the commercial real estate in the city. Sophia smiled sadly. He would have liked you, I think. You remind me of him. Honest work, honest hands. David wasn't sure how to respond to that. He pulled out his phone to calculate what to charge her. $200 was fair for the work and the after-hours service. But something told him that this woman could afford more. She was clearly wealthy. The BMW, the designer clothes, the way she carried herself screamed money. But there was also something vulnerable about her that made him hesitate to take advantage. What do I owe you? Sophia asked, reaching for her purse. $200 covers it. She pulled out her wallet and David's eyes widened. It was stuffed with cash. Hundreds, fifties, more money than David had seen in one place in years. She counted out $200 without even looking, then paused. This seems like too little for saving my evening. It's fair, David said firmly. I don't overcharge people. Sophia studied him again with that intense gaze. Even when they can clearly afford it? Especially then. She handed him the money, her fingers brushing his as she did. You're an interesting man, David Chen. Most people would have seen an opportunity here. Most people didn't raise me. Sophia laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her entire face. Your parents did well. David thought about his absent father and his mother, who'd worked 3 jobs until cancer took her when David was 22. My mom did her best. Where is she now? Gone. Been just me and Emma for a while now. Something shifted in Sophia's expression. I'm sorry. That must be lonely. We have each other. Yes, Sophia said quietly. But still. She got back into the BMW and started the engine. It ran smoothly now, the temperature gauge holding steady. She rolled down the window as she prepared to leave. David, the proper repair. Where should I take it? Honestly, any good mechanic can handle it. Continental Automotive on 5th Street is solid. Ask for Rodriguez. He's fair. Not here? David shrugged. Tony doesn't like working on cars this expensive. Says they make him nervous. Sophia nodded, then seemed to make a decision. What time do you get off work tomorrow? Depends on what comes in, usually around 6. Would you be willing to do the proper repair? I'll pay whatever you think is fair. David hesitated. It would mean more money, but it would also mean explaining to Tony why he was doing side work with garage equipment. I don't know if... Please, Sophia said, and there was that desperation again, carefully controlled but unmistakable. I don't trust Easy, but I trust you. There was a story there, David realized. A reason why a woman who clearly had access to the best mechanics in the city was asking a working-class guy in a rundown garage to fix her car. But midnight in a parking lot wasn't the time for those kinds of questions. Okay, he said. Come by tomorrow around 6. I'll talk to Tony about using the bay after hours. Sophia's smile was radiant. Thank you, David, really. You don't know what this means to me. As she drove away, David watched the BMW's taillights disappear into the night. He had a feeling that Sophia Martinez was going to complicate his life in ways he couldn't even imagine. But something about her, the vulnerability beneath the polish, the way she'd talked about her father, the loneliness he'd recognized in her voice, made him want to help her. He locked up the garage and drove his Honda toward Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment. his mind still spinning with questions. Who was Sofia Martinez, really? What was she running from? And why did a woman who could clearly afford any mechanic in the city want his help specifically? 20 minutes later, as he carried a sleeping Emma to the car and listened to her mumble about the pictures she'd drawn that day, David found himself looking forward to tomorrow evening. For the first time in months, he had something to anticipate besides bills and eviction notices. He didn't know it yet, but Sofia Martinez was about to change everything. The next morning brought unseasonably warm weather and a phone call that made David's heart sink. Emma was coughing again, worse than before, and Mrs. Rodriguez was worried. "Mijo, I think you need to take her to the doctor. This cough, it's not getting better." David closed his eyes. A doctor's visit meant money he didn't have, especially with no insurance. But he couldn't ignore Emma's health, not again. "I'll pick her up early today," he promised. At Murphy's garage, David found himself distracted, his mind split between worry about Emma and anticipation about seeing Sofia again. Around noon, Tony pulled him aside. "You seem off today, Dave. Everything okay?" "Emma's sick again. I might need to leave early to take her to urgent care." Tony's expression softened. He had 3 kids of his own. "Take the afternoon off. Jenkins can handle the afternoon jobs." "I can't afford—" "It's paid time off, you idiot. Your kid comes first." David felt a rush of gratitude toward his gruff boss. "Thank you, Tony. Really. Just don't make a habit of it. And hey, you mentioned someone wanting after-hours work on a BMW? Yeah, she'll be here around 6. BMW work pays well. Make sure you charge accordingly. Rich people expect to pay rich people prices." That afternoon, David sat in the urgent care waiting room, with Emma curled up in his lap, her small body racked with coughing fits. The receptionist had been clear, $250 for the visit, due at time of service. "We'll figure it out," he whispered to Emma. "Don't worry about anything except getting better." When they finally saw the doctor, the diagnosis was bronchitis, antibiotics, rest, and a follow-up. If she didn't improve in a week, the prescription would cost another $60. Walking out of the urgent care clinic with Emma's hand in his and a prescription in his pocket, David felt the familiar weight of financial despair. But tonight, he had a job that would more than cover today's medical expenses. Sometimes, he thought, the universe provided exactly what you needed, exactly when you needed it. As they drove back toward Murphy's garage, Emma asked, "Daddy, are you worried about the money?" "No, sweetheart. Daddy's got it handled." For once, that might actually be true. Sofia arrived at Murphy's garage at exactly 6 o'clock, pulling up in the same black BMW, just as David was finishing his conversation with Tony about using the bay after hours. She stepped out wearing jeans and a simple white blouse, a far cry from the formal attire of the night before. But somehow she looked even more striking in casual clothes. "Right on time," David called out, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "I'm usually punctual to a fault," Sofia said, then paused. "Is that your daughter?" David turned to see Emma sitting on an overturned crate near the garage entrance, carefully coloring in a book Mrs. Rodriguez had given her. She looked up at the sound of voices, her dark eyes curious but cautious. "Emma, come say hello," David said gently. Emma approached slowly, clutching her coloring book against her chest. She'd always been shy around strangers, but there was something else in her hesitation now, a wariness that children develop when they've learned that adults sometimes disappoint. "Hi," Emma said quietly. Sofia crouched down to Emma's level, a gesture that immediately caught David's attention. Most adults talk down to children, both literally and figuratively. "Hi there, I'm Sofia. Your daddy's going to help fix my car." "What's wrong with it?" Emma asked. "Something called a radiator hose broke. Do you know what that is?" Emma shook her head, but she was clearly intrigued. "Well," Sofia said, glancing at David for permission before continuing, "it's like a straw that helps the car drink water to stay cool. When the straw breaks, the car gets too hot and can't work properly." "Like when I get a fever?" "Exactly like that," Sofia smiled. "Your daddy is like a doctor for cars." Emma giggled, the first genuine laugh David had heard from her in days. "Daddy, she thinks you're a car doctor." "I guess I am, in a way," David said, feeling warmth spread through his chest at the sound of his daughter's laughter. As David began working on the BMW, He was acutely aware of Sophia and Emma's conversation continuing nearby. Sophia had somehow convinced Emma to show her the coloring book, and they were now engaged in serious discussion about the proper color for a princess's dress. "I think pink is nice," Emma was saying, "but purple is more interesting." "I completely agree," Sophia replied. "Pink is pretty, but purple is powerful." "That's what I think too. Daddy, did you hear? Sophia likes purple princesses." David looked up from the engine bay to see Sophia examining Emma's artwork with the same intense focus she'd used to watch him work the night before. "Purple princesses are definitely the best kind," he agreed. "Your daddy seems very smart," Sophia told Emma. "Does he help you with your homework?" "When he's not too tired," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Sometimes he falls asleep at the table, but that's okay because he works really hard." David felt heat creep up his neck. He didn't want Sophia to know how exhausted he was most evenings, how he sometimes struggled to stay awake long enough to help Emma with her reading. "That shows how much he loves you," Sophia said simply. "Working hard is one way daddies take care of their children. That's what Mrs. Rodriguez says too. She says daddy is a good papa even when things are hard." David's throat tightened. He concentrated on the radiator hose, using the familiar work to steady himself. Emma's innocent words had revealed more about their situation than he would have chosen to share. "Mrs. Rodriguez sounds very wise," Sophia said. "Is she your babysitter?" "Sort of. She watches me when Daddy has to work late. She makes really good rice and beans, and she lets me help water her plants." "That sounds lovely. Do you like plants?" "I like flowers," Emma said. "Someday when we have our own house, Daddy says we can plant a garden." David winced. Their someday house was a story he told Emma to help her sleep, a fairy tale about stability that seemed more distant with each passing month. He hadn't meant for Sophia to hear about their dreams. "What kind of flowers would you plant?" Sophia asked. "Sunflowers, because they're tall and happy. And maybe some pink roses for pretty, and vegetables too, so we can make soup." "That sounds like a perfect garden," Sophia said, and David could hear genuine warmth in her voice. "I bet your daddy would be very good at growing things." "He's good at fixing things," Emma said proudly. "He fixes cars, and he fixes my toys when they break, and he fixed my dollhouse when the roof fell off." David remembered that dollhouse, a plastic monstrosity from a thrift store that Emma had loved despite its broken pieces. He'd spent an entire evening gluing it back together, mostly because he couldn't afford to buy her a new one. "He sounds like a very talented man," Sophia said. As David worked, he found himself listening to their conversation with growing amazement. Sophia wasn't talking to Emma the way most adults did, with that condescending sweetness that children could spot from a mile away. She was talking to her like a person, asking real questions and listening to the answers. "Sophia," Emma said suddenly, "are you married?" "Emma," David called out, embarrassed. "That's not polite to ask." "It's okay," Sophia laughed. "No, Emma, I'm not married. Do you have kids?" "No, I don't." "Why not?" David was about to intervene again, but Sophia answered before he could. "That's a good question. I guess I've been too busy with work to think about having a family." "Work is important," Emma said seriously, "but families are important too. Right, Daddy?" "Right, sweetheart," David managed, his voice thick. "Maybe you could have both," Emma suggested helpfully. "Daddy works and still has me." "You're absolutely right," Sophia said. "Your daddy is very lucky to have you." By the time David finished the radiator repair, the sun was setting and the garage was bathed in golden light. Emma had somehow convinced Sophia to help her color an entire page of her book, and they were both sitting cross-legged on the concrete floor, debating the merits of different crayon techniques. "All done," David announced, closing the hood. Sophia stood up, brushing dust off her jeans. "Already? That was fast." "Not much to it, really. The hard part was finding the right hose. Your car is German engineering. They don't use standard parts." "What do I owe you?" David hesitated. A fair price would be around $300 for the part and labor, but he found himself reluctant to charge her the full amount. She'd spent the last hour making his daughter laugh, treating Emma with a kindness that was rare in their world. $250 covers it," he said finally. Sophia raised an eyebrow. "That seems low for German engineering." It's fair. She pulled out her wallet and counted out $300. The extra 50 is for keeping Emma entertained while you worked. She's delightful company. You don't have to. I want to, Sophia said firmly. Besides, she taught me some very important things about purple princesses. Emma beamed up at both of them. Sophia is nice, Daddy. I like her. I like you too, Emma, Sophia said, crouching down again. Very much. As Sophia prepared to leave, she hesitated by her car door. David, can I ask you something? Sure. Would you and Emma like to have dinner? I know a place nearby that makes excellent pizza and… She glanced at Emma, who was listening intently. I'd enjoy the company. David's first instinct was to say no. Accepting charity, even disguised as friendship, went against every principle his mother had taught him. But Emma was looking at him with such hope, and Sophia's invitation seemed genuine rather than pitying. Please, Daddy, Emma asked. I'm really hungry, and I promise I'll be good. The fact that Emma felt she had to promise to be good broke David's heart. She was always good, too understanding of their circumstances. Okay, David said, surprised by his own decision. But we're paying our own way. Sophia looked like she wanted to argue, but she simply nodded. Of course. The pizza place Sophia suggested was a small family-owned restaurant called Mama Rossetti's, with checkered tablecloths and the kind of warm, chaotic atmosphere that made everyone feel welcome. Emma's eyes went wide when they walked in, and she saw the enormous pizzas being carried to other tables. Can we really eat here? She whispered to David. Yes, sweetheart. Order whatever you want. They slid into a booth, Emma between David and Sophia, and for the first time in months, David felt something approaching normal. The waitress brought Emma a coloring sheet and crayons, and Sophia immediately began helping her choose colors again. You're very good with children, David observed. I used to babysit a lot when I was younger, Sophia said. My cousin's kids mostly. I always thought I'd have my own someday, but… She shrugged. Life took different turns. It's not too late, David said gently. Isn't it? I'm 34. Most of my friends have teenagers. 34 isn't old. Emma's mom was 31 when Emma was born. Sophia glanced at him sharply. Emma's mom? My ex-wife. She left when Emma was 3. I'm sorry. That must have been incredibly difficult. David watched Emma coloring, her tongue poking out slightly in the concentration. It was hard on Emma. She still asks about her sometimes, but less than she used to. And you? Was it hard on you? Honestly, the hardest part was feeling like I'd failed them both. Sarah, my ex, she wanted stability, security, a future I couldn't provide. She wasn't wrong to want those things. But she was wrong to leave, Sophia said quietly. Was she? Look at us now. Living in our car, Emma getting sick because I can't afford to keep the heat on, eating pizza because a stranger took pity on us. That's not what this is, Sophia interrupted. David looked at her, surprised by the intensity in her voice. This isn't pity, David. This is… She paused, watching Emma add purple flowers to her coloring sheet. This is the first time in years that I've felt like part of a family. The simple honesty of her statement left David speechless. Here was this successful, beautiful woman, clearly wealthy and accomplished, saying that dinner with him and Emma made her feel like she belonged somewhere. Daddy, Emma said suddenly, Sophia doesn't have a family either, like us. Emma, that's not… It's okay, Sophia said. She's right. I have money and a big house and a successful business, but I don't have what you two have. What's that? David asked. Sophia looked at Emma, then back at him. Love that doesn't come with conditions. The pizza arrived, and Emma's delighted squeals broke the serious mood. As they ate, David found himself relaxing for the first time in months. Sophia asked Emma about school, listened to detailed explanations of second-grade social dynamics, and somehow made a 7-year-old feel like the most interesting person in the room. This is the best pizza ever, Emma declared, tomato sauce on her chin. The very best, Sophia agreed solemnly. As they prepared to leave, Emma tugged on Sophia's sleeve. Will we see you again? Sophia looked at David, a question in her eyes. Would you like to? Yes, Emma said, before David could respond. Daddy, can Sophia come have pizza with us again? David met Sophia's gaze across the table. There was something happening here, something that scared him and thrilled him in equal measure. If Sophia wants to, she's always welcome. I'd like that very much, Sophia said softly. Walking to their cars in the parking lot, Emma between them, David felt a dangerous flutter of hope. For 2 hours, they'd been a family. Imperfect, improvised, but real. Emma was happier than she'd been in weeks, and David had glimpsed what their life might look like with someone else in it. Thank you, he told Sophia as they reached the BMW. For dinner, for being kind to Emma, for everything. Thank you for letting me join you, Sophia replied. It's been a long time since I've had such a perfect evening. As they drove away in opposite directions, David caught Emma's reflection in the rear-view mirror. She was smiling, humming to herself, and for the first time in months, she looked like the carefree child she should be. Daddy, she said sleepily, I think Sophia might be our guardian angel. David's throat tightened. Why do you think that, sweetheart? Because she showed up when we needed help, and she makes you smile. Looking back, David would remember that moment as the beginning of everything, the first time he allowed himself to believe that their story might have a happy ending after all. 2 weeks after that first dinner at Mama Rossetti's, David's phone rang while he was elbow deep in the engine of a 1995 Camaro. The number was unfamiliar, but something about the timing made him answer anyway. David, it's Sophia. I hope I'm not interrupting your work. The sound of her voice sent an unexpected warmth through his chest. They'd spoken several times since that evening, brief conversations when she'd stopped by the garage to check on her car, or when she'd called to ask about Emma's recovery from bronchitis. Not at all. What's up? I have a proposition for you. There's a charity gala this Saturday night, a fundraiser for children's literacy programs. I wondered if you and Emma might like to join me. David's hand tightened on the phone. A gala? Sophia, I don't think... Before you say no, hear me out. Emma mentioned that she loves reading, and they're going to have authors there doing readings for children. Plus, there will be books for kids to take home. I thought she might enjoy it. The hesitation in David's voice was clear. These charity things, they're not really our crowd. They're not really my crowd either, Sophia said softly. But I have to go for business reasons, and I'd much rather have friends there with me. Friends? The word hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility and uncertainty. I don't have anything appropriate to wear to something like that, David said finally. It's not as formal as you might think. Business casual is fine. And David? Her voice grew gentle. I'm not asking because I feel sorry for you. I'm asking because I enjoy your company, both of you. David closed his eyes, torn between desire and pragmatism. Let me think about it, okay? Of course. But David, sometimes good things happen when we say yes to new experiences. That evening, David sat in their usual booth at Mama Rossetti's with Emma, watching her work her way through a plate of spaghetti while he nursed a coffee and picked at a slice of pizza. Their dinner dates with Sophia had become a weekly tradition, something Emma looked forward to all week long. Where's Sophia tonight? Emma asked, twirling noodles around her fork with the intense concentration that 7-year-olds brought to complex tasks. She had to work late, but she asked me to tell you something. Emma's eyes lit up. What? She invited us to a party on Saturday, a party with books and authors who will read stories. Really? Emma bounced in her seat. Can we go? Please, Daddy? David studied his daughter's excited face. When was the last time Emma had been to a party? When was the last time she'd done anything that was purely fun, with no worry about money or their next meal or where they'd sleep? It's a fancy party, Em, with rich people and expensive clothes. Emma's face fell slightly. Oh, we don't belong at fancy parties. The resignation in her voice, the 7-year-old understanding that some experiences weren't meant for people like them, broke David's heart. Who says we don't belong? Nobody says it, but we know, right? Like how we know we can't afford the toys at the expensive stores. David reached across the table and took Emma's small hand in his. What if I told you that sometimes, even working people like us get invited to fancy parties? Do we? Sometimes. If we have a friend who wants us there. Emma's eyes widened. Sophia wants us at her party? She does. Then we should go, Emma said with the simple logic of childhood. Friends do things together. Saturday arrived gray and drizzly, matching David's mood as he stood in front of the mirror in Mrs. Rodriguez's bathroom, trying to make his one good shirt look presentable. It was a blue button-down he'd bought for job interviews, paired with his only pair of dress pants and the least scuffed of his 2 pairs of shoes. "You look very handsome, mijo," Mrs. Rodriguez said, appearing in the doorway with Emma beside her. David turned and felt his breath catch. Emma was wearing a navy blue dress that Mrs. Rodriguez had somehow procured, her hair braided with small white ribbons. She looked beautiful and young and hopeful in a way that made David's chest ache. "Where did this dress come from?" he asked. "My neighbor's granddaughter outgrew it," Mrs. Rodriguez said quickly, avoiding his eyes. Such a shame to waste it. David suspected the truth was more complicated and more expensive, but he didn't push. Emma was twirling in front of the mirror, clearly delighted with her transformation. "Do I look fancy enough for the party, Daddy?" "You look perfect, sweetheart, like a princess." The charity gala was being held at the Meridian Hotel downtown, a gleaming tower of glass and marble that David had driven past countless times but never imagined entering. As they approached the valet stand, David's ancient Honda looking painfully out of place among the BMWs and Mercedes, he almost turned around. "Second thoughts?" Sophia's voice came from behind them. David turned to see her walking toward them from the hotel entrance, and for a moment, he forgot how to breathe. She was wearing a midnight blue cocktail dress that made her look like something from a movie, her hair swept up in an elegant chignon. But what struck him most was her smile, genuine and warm, focused entirely on Emma. "You look absolutely stunning," Sophia told Emma, crouching down to admire the navy dress. "Blue is definitely your color." "Mrs. Rodriguez helped me pick it out," Emma said proudly. "Do you really think I look fancy?" "I think you look like the most beautiful girl at the party," Sophia said solemnly. As they walked through the hotel lobby, David became acutely aware of the stares they were attracting. Not hostile exactly, but curious. Sophia Martinez was clearly someone important here, and people were wondering who her companions were. "Don't pay attention to them," Sophia murmured, linking her arm through his. "Half of them are wondering who the handsome man is, and the other half are jealous that I found such a beautiful little girl to bring as my date." The ballroom was a vision of understated elegance, crystal chandeliers, round tables draped in cream linens, and enough flowers to stock a garden center. Emma's eyes were wide as saucers as she took in the scene. "It's like a fairy tale," she whispered. "Wait until you see the children's area," Sophia said. "They have a whole section set up with reading corners and art stations." As they made their way through the crowd, David noticed how effortlessly Sophia navigated the social dynamics. She introduced him and Emma to a steady stream of people, board members, local politicians, business owners, always with the same phrase. "I'd like you to meet my friends, David and Emma Chen." Friends, not charity cases, not guests, but friends. "Sophia, darling." A woman in an elaborate pink gown descended on them, her smile bright and sharp. "How wonderful to see you. And who are these lovely people?" "Margaret, I'd like you to meet David Chen and his daughter Emma." "David, this is Margaret Whitmore. She's on the hospital board with me." Margaret's eyes swept over David's modest attire and settled on Emma with the kind of smile adults gave children they found quaint. "How sweet. Are you here with the Big Brother, Big Sister program?" "No," Sophia said smoothly. "They're here with me. David is one of the most talented mechanics in the city, and Emma is 7 years old and already reading chapter books." "Oh," Margaret's smile faltered slightly. "How interesting." As Margaret moved away, David felt heat creep up his neck. Maybe this was a mistake. "Ignore her," Sophia said firmly. "Margaret Whitmore thinks the world exists for her entertainment. She has no idea what real value looks like." They found their assigned table, number 3, David noticed, which seemed to indicate some level of importance. As other guests joined them, David realized he was seated among some of the city's elite: a federal judge, a hospital CEO, the owner of the largest construction company in the state. "So David," the judge said as the first course arrived, "Sophia tells us you're in automotive repair. That must be interesting work." "It has its moments," David replied carefully. "I imagine you see all types. Must give you quite a perspective on human nature." David glanced at Sophia, who was watching the conversation with interest. "People are pretty much the same everywhere. They want their problems fixed quickly and fairly." "And do you fix them fairly?" "I try to charge what the work is worth, not what I think people can afford." The construction company owner laughed. "A man of principle. That's refreshing in today's economy." As the conversation continued, David found himself relaxing slightly. These people seemed genuinely interested in his perspective, asking thoughtful questions about small business challenges and the automotive industry. Emma, meanwhile, was charming everyone at the table with her polite answers and obvious intelligence. "Emma," the judge's wife asked, "what's your favorite subject in school?" "Reading," Emma said without hesitation. "And math. Daddy helps me with both." "That's wonderful. What are you reading now?" "Charlotte's Web. It's about a pig and a spider who are friends even though they're different." "That sounds like a lovely story. Do you think differences matter in friendship?" Emma considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important questions. "I think differences make friendships more interesting, like how Daddy knows about cars and Sophia knows about business, but they both know how to be kind." The adults at the table exchanged glances, clearly charmed by Emma's wisdom. As the evening progressed, David began to notice subtle shifts in the atmosphere. During the cocktail hour, he overheard fragments of conversations that made him increasingly uncomfortable. Martinez charity case. Trying to make a point about income inequality. Cute, really, how she's slumming it. Each whispered comment hit like a physical blow. They thought he was Sophia's pet project, a working-class mascot she'd brought to demonstrate her social consciousness. The realization that some of these people saw Emma as part of a publicity stunt made his jaw clench with barely controlled anger. "Daddy?" Emma tugged on his sleeve during the silent auction. "Are you okay? You look upset." "I'm fine, sweetheart," he lied, forcing a smile. "Are you having fun?" "The best time ever. Sophia showed me where the authors are reading stories, and there's a lady who makes balloon animals, and—" Emma's excitement was infectious, and David found himself genuinely smiling, despite his growing discomfort. The breaking point came during the fundraising portion of the evening. The auction was in full swing, with items going for thousands of dollars. Weekend getaways, signed sports memorabilia, dinner parties at exclusive restaurants. David watched in amazement as people bid casually on items that cost more than he made in 6 months. "And now," the auctioneer announced, "we have a very special item. A week-long stay at the Whitmore family estate in Martha's Vineyard, generously donated by Margaret and Charles Whitmore." The bidding started at $5,000 and quickly escalated. David watched, fascinated and horrified, as the price climbed toward $20,000. "Sophia should bid on that," the judge's wife suggested. "You'd love Martha's Vineyard." "I'm sure I would," Sophia replied diplomatically. "Oh, you simply must. And you could bring your little friends here? Wouldn't that be an adventure, Emma?" Emma looked confused by the suggestion, but she smiled politely. "That sounds nice." David felt something snap inside him. The casual assumption that Emma would be thrilled by their charity, the condescending way they discussed his daughter like she was a pet. They could take on vacation, the entire evening of being treated like an interesting exhibit. It all came crashing down at once. "Excuse me," he said quietly, standing from the table. "I need some air." He walked quickly toward the hotel lobby, his face burning with humiliation and anger. Behind him, he could hear Sophia calling his name, but he didn't stop until he reached the relative quiet of the hotel's front entrance. "David, wait!" He turned to see Sophia hurrying toward him, her face creased with concern. "What happened? What's wrong?" "What's wrong?" David's voice was sharper than he intended. "What's wrong is that I'm a charity case, Sophia. A mascot you brought to show how progressive you are. That's not true, isn't it? Your little friends? Like Emma and I are pets you picked up at the shelter." Sophia's face went pale. "David, I never meant for you to feel that way." "But that's what this is, isn't it? The successful businesswoman and her working-class project. God, I'm such an idiot for thinking this could be real." "It is real," Sophia said desperately. "My friendship with you and Emma is the most real thing in my life right now." "Then why didn't you tell me who you really are?" The question hung between them like a challenge. David had spent 2 weeks wondering about Sophia's background, noting the expensive clothes, the easy way she navigated wealth, the deference people showed her. Tonight had filled in the blanks in ways that made him feel naive and foolish. "What do you mean?" "I mean Martinez Construction. I mean the fact that you're not just successful. Your Martinez family's successful. I mean the fact that you own half the commercial real estate in this city, and I'm the idiot mechanic who's been treating you like a regular person. Sophia's shoulders sagged. How did you— The program, David said bitterly, pulling the gala program from his jacket pocket. Martinez Construction is listed as the title sponsor. And then I started putting pieces together. Your father built everything from nothing, died when you were 12, left you a real estate empire. Ring any bells? David, I can explain. Can you? Can you explain why you've been slumming it with the poor single dad and his kid? What is this? Some kind of social experiment? Stop it, Sophia said sharply. Just stop. Yes, I have money. Yes, my family built a successful business. But that has nothing to do with why I care about you and Emma. Doesn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're playing house with the working class to make yourself feel better about having everything handed to you. The words were cruel, and David knew it even as he said them. But the humiliation of the evening, the whispered comments, the casual assumption that he and Emma were charity cases, it all poured out in a rush of anger and hurt pride. Sophia took a step back as if he'd slapped her. Is that really what you think of me? I don't know what to think anymore. A month ago, you were just someone who needed her car fixed. Now I find out you're practically royalty, and I'm the poor bastard you've been collecting good karma points from. You're being ridiculous. Am I? Then tell me, Sophia. When your business friends ask about your new hobby, how do you describe us? The struggling single father and his adorable daughter? Your little social conscience project? Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. I describe you as the man who showed me what real integrity looks like. I describe Emma as the little girl who reminded me what unconditional love means. I describe both of you as the family I never knew I wanted. Her words hit David like a physical blow, cutting through his anger and exposing the raw fear underneath. He was falling for this woman, had been falling for weeks, and the discovery of who she really was made everything feel like a lie. Family, he repeated bitterly. Right, because that's what this is. The billionaire heiress and the mechanic who can barely keep his lights on. Money doesn't define family, David. Maybe not in fairy tales, but in the real world, yeah, it kind of does. You live in a different universe than Emma and I do. Tonight just made that crystal clear. Inside the hotel, they could hear the sounds of the gala continuing. Laughter, music, the gentle murmur of people who belonged in places like this. People like Sophia. So, what are you saying? Sophia asked quietly. David looked at her standing there in her beautiful dress, looking every inch the successful businesswoman she was, and felt his heart break. I'm saying maybe we should stop pretending this can work. David, Emma's getting attached to you. Hell, I'm getting attached to you. But this isn't a romantic comedy, Sophia. This is real life. And in real life, people from different worlds don't just magically make it work. We could try. And then what? You get bored with playing poor and go back to your real life? Emma gets her heart broken when you realize that charity dinners and pizza dates aren't enough to bridge a gap this big? Sophia was crying now, tears sliding down her cheeks despite her efforts to maintain composure. You're not giving us a chance. I'm protecting my daughter, David said firmly, and maybe protecting myself too. He turned to walk away, then stopped. Tell Emma I went to get the car. Tell her I'm proud of how well she behaved tonight. As David walked away, leaving Sophia standing alone in front of the gleaming hotel, he told himself he was doing the right thing. Better to end this now, before Emma got hurt, before he let himself believe in something that could never last. But the hollowness in his chest suggested that walking away might be the biggest mistake he'd ever made. 3 days passed in painful silence. David threw himself into work at Murphy's garage, staying late, taking on extra jobs, doing anything to avoid the questions in Emma's eyes. She'd asked about Sophia exactly once. When is Sophia coming to have pizza with us again? And the hope in her voice had nearly shattered him. She's busy with work, sweetheart, he'd said, hating himself for the lie. Emma had nodded with the resigned understanding that 7-year-olds shouldn't possess, and David knew she was beginning to suspect that another adult in her life had simply disappeared. On Thursday morning, Tony pulled him aside while he was working on a brake job. You look like hell, Dave. What's eating you? David shrugged, not trusting his voice. He'd barely slept since Saturday night, replaying the conversation with Sophia over and over, wondering if he'd been too harsh, too proud, too quick to assume the worst. Woman trouble? Tony pressed. Something like that. Want some unsolicited advice from a guy who's been married for 23 years? Not really. Too bad. Here it is anyway. Pride is a luxury single fathers can't afford. If there's a good woman who cares about you and Emma, you better swallow that pride before you lose her. David was about to respond when Emma burst through the garage door, her backpack flying behind her as she ran toward him. "Daddy! Daddy, look!" She was waving a piece of paper, her face flushed with excitement and exertion. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared in the doorway behind her, slightly out of breath. "I'm sorry, David. She saw this in the newspaper and insisted on bringing it to you immediately." Emma thrust the paper into David's hands. It was the business section of the morning paper, folded to reveal a large photograph and headline that made his blood run cold. Martinez heiress announces major philanthropic initiative. The photo showed Sophia at a press conference, looking poised and professional in a charcoal business suit. But what caught David's attention was the smaller headline beneath, Children's Education Fund to focus on single-parent families. "Look, Daddy!" Emma was practically bouncing. "It's Sophia! She's in the newspaper. Mrs. Rodriguez says she's famous." David's hands trembled as he read the article. Sophia Martinez, heir to the Martinez construction empire and current CEO of Martinez Holdings, announced yesterday the launch of a $50 million initiative to support educational programs for children from single-parent households. The program, called the Future Builders Foundation, will provide scholarships, tutoring services, and educational resources to families facing economic hardship. Every child deserves access to quality education, regardless of their family's financial circumstances, Martinez said at the press conference. Too often we see brilliant young minds limited by economic factors beyond their control. This initiative aims to level the playing field. The foundation will focus specifically on working families where one parent is providing both emotional and financial support. Single parents are heroes, Martinez continued. They work multiple jobs, sacrifice their own needs, and still find ways to nurture their children's dreams. They deserve our support, not our judgment. Martinez, 34, is known for her private nature despite her family's prominence in the business community. This marks her first major public philanthropic announcement since taking over the family business following her father's death 22 years ago. David's chest tightened as he read further. When asked what inspired this particular focus, Martinez became emotional. "I've recently had the privilege of witnessing firsthand the incredible love and sacrifice of single parents. I've seen how a father will go without meals to ensure his daughter has enough to eat. I've watched a 7-year-old girl worry about her father's happiness instead of focusing on childhood games. These families don't need our pity. They need our respect and our support." "Daddy, why do you look sad?" Emma asked, her excitement fading as she noticed his expression. "Isn't it good that Sophia wants to help families like us?" David set the newspaper down carefully, his mind reeling. The article made it clear that Sophia's foundation was inspired by them, by him and Emma. She was essentially broadcasting their personal struggles to the entire city, turning their private hardships into a public cause. "Mrs. Rodriguez," he said quietly, "could you take Emma inside for a few minutes? I need to make a phone call." "Of course, Miko. Come on, Emma. Let's see if we can find some cookies in my purse." Once they were gone, David pulled out his phone and dialed Sophia's number with shaking fingers. She answered on the second ring. "David? Thank God. I've been hoping you'd call." "What the hell is this?" he interrupted, his voice tight with fury. "What's what?" "The newspaper, Sophia. The foundation. The fact that you've turned Emma and me into your poster children for poverty." There was a long pause. "David, it's not like that." "Isn't it? Because this article makes it sound exactly like that. A father will go without meals to ensure his daughter has enough to eat. A 7-year-old girl worry about her father's happiness. Sound familiar? I never mentioned your names. You didn't have to. Anyone who knows us will connect the dots. Emma's teacher, the other parents at school, Tony, Mrs. Rodriguez, they'll all know that you've been studying us like specimens in a lab. That's not what happened, Sophia said desperately. I started this foundation because meeting you and Emma opened my eyes to struggles I never understood. But it's not about exploiting your situation. It's about helping families like yours. Families like mine, David repeated bitterly. You mean poor families, struggling families, families that need rescuing by rich people with guilty consciences. Stop putting words in my mouth. This foundation will help thousands of children. While you get to feel good about yourself and look progressive in the business section, win-win, right? David, please listen to me. I care about you and Emma more than I've ever cared about anyone. The foundation has nothing to do with that, doesn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you took our most private struggles and turned them into your public relations campaign. David could hear Sophia crying now, her voice breaking as she tried to respond. I never meant to hurt you. I swear I never meant, but you did hurt us. You've made Emma and me into charity cases for the whole city to read about over their morning coffee. No one will know it's you. Everyone will know it's us, David exploded. Do you think there are a lot of single fathers with 7-year-old daughters frequenting high-end charity galas? Do you think your quote about witnessing sacrifice firsthand won't make people curious about who you've been spending time with? The garage had gone quiet around them. Tony and the other mechanics had stopped working, clearly aware that something serious was happening, but trying to give David privacy. I can't undo the press conference, Sophia said quietly. But I can explain. There's nothing to explain. You used us, Sophia. Maybe you didn't mean to. Maybe you thought you were helping, but you used our pain to launch your feel-good project. That's not true. Then why didn't you tell me about it? Why didn't you mention that you were planning to start a foundation for single parents? Why did I have to find out by reading about it in the newspaper? The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that David wondered if the call had dropped. Because I knew you'd react exactly like this, Sophia finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. So you knew this would hurt me, and you did it anyway. I knew you'd be too proud to accept that your story might inspire something good. I knew you'd rather struggle in silence than let anyone acknowledge that single parents like you are heroes. Heroes? David laughed bitterly. I'm not a hero, Sophia. I'm a guy who can't afford to take his kid to the doctor, who sleeps in his car because he can't make rent, who has to count change to buy his daughter a happy meal. If that's heroic to you, then you don't understand what the word means. You're wrong, Sophia said fiercely. You sacrifice everything for Emma. You work multiple jobs. You put her needs before your own. I do what any parent would do. That's not heroism, it's survival. And you do it with dignity and love and... Stop it, David's voice cracked. Just stop turning our struggles into some inspirational story. We're not inspiration porn for rich people, Sophia. We're real people with real problems, and those problems don't disappear because you write a check or start a foundation. I know that. I know. Do you? Because it seems like you think money solves everything. Start a foundation, throw some scholarships around, and suddenly single parents everywhere will be saved. That's not what I think. Then what do you think? Because from my perspective, it looks like you took everything I shared with you in confidence and turned it into a press release. David could hear commotion in the background of Sophia's call. Voices, phones ringing, the sounds of a busy office. I have to go, Sophia said. There's a board meeting about the foundation and... Of course there is. Don't let me keep you from your important business. David, please. Can we meet tonight? Can we talk about this properly? I think we've said everything we need to say. Please, just give me a chance to explain. Explain what? How you're going to help families like mine while making sure everyone knows how generous and socially conscious you are. That's not fair. Fair? David's voice rose again. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that Emma will go to school tomorrow and wonder if her teacher treats her differently because she knows we're the poor family that inspired the rich lady's charity? Is it fair that I'll have to look Mrs. Rodriguez in the eye knowing she's probably figuring out that we're the pathetic case study behind Sophia Martinez's public consciousness awakening? David, I trusted you, he said, his voice breaking. I let Emma get attached to you. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could have something real. But this isn't real, is it? This is you playing Lady Bountiful with the working class. You're wrong. You're so wrong. Am I? Then answer me this. If we hadn't met, if you hadn't seen how the other half lives, would this foundation exist? The pause was too long, too telling. I thought so, David said quietly. David, wait. But he'd already hung up. He stood in the garage, surrounded by the familiar smells of oil and metal, feeling more alone than he had since the day Sarah walked out. At least then, he'd known why she left. She wanted more than he could give. But this felt different. This felt like betrayal wrapped in good intentions. Daddy? Emma's voice came from behind him, small and worried. Are you fighting with Sophia? David turned to see his daughter standing in the doorway, her face creased with the kind of concern that no 7-year-old should have to carry. Mrs. Rodriguez hovered behind her, clearly torn between giving them privacy and wanting to help. It's complicated, sweetheart, David said, kneeling down to Emma's level. Is she not our friend anymore? The question hit him like a physical blow. How could he explain to Emma that sometimes adults who care about you can hurt you without meaning to? How could he make her understand that good intentions didn't always lead to good outcomes? I don't know, Em. Emma's lower lip trembled. Did I do something wrong? Is she mad at me? No, baby. No, you didn't do anything wrong. This is grown-up stuff, okay? It's not about you. But even as he said it, David knew it wasn't entirely true. This was about Emma, about both of them, about the fact that their private struggles had become someone else's public cause. Emma nodded solemnly, but he could see the wheels turning in her head. She was already blaming herself, already wondering what she could have done differently to keep another adult from disappearing from their lives. Can I call her? Emma asked suddenly. Can I ask her to come have pizza with us? Maybe if we explain that we miss her. Emma, I don't think... Please, Daddy. She was sad the last time we saw her, and you're sad now. And I don't understand why everyone has to be sad when we were all happy before. David closed his eyes, fighting back tears. Emma was right. They had been happy. For a few brief weeks, they'd felt like a family. But that happiness had been built on a foundation of unequal knowledge. And now that David understood who Sophia really was, everything felt different. Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements that can't be fixed with pizza, sweetheart. But you said families work things out. We're not... David stopped himself before he could finish the sentence. We're not a family. But how could he say that to Emma when she'd clearly begun to think of Sophia as part of their small unit? His phone buzzed with a text message. Despite everything, his heart jumped, hoping it might be Sophia trying to find a way to explain, to make this right somehow. But it wasn't Sophia. It was a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Chen, this is Rebecca Walsh from Channel 7 News. We'd like to interview you about the Martinez Foundation announcement. Could you call me at your earliest convenience? David stared at the message, feeling sick. It had already started. The media attention, the questions, the turning of their private life into public consumption. A second message came through, then a third. Different reporters, different news outlets, all wanting to talk to the single father who had inspired Sophia Martinez's philanthropic awakening. Daddy, you look really pale, Emma said, touching his arm. Are you sick? I'm okay, sweetheart, just tired. But he wasn't okay. He was drowning in the realization that their quiet, private struggle for survival had become a news story. That Emma's innocent comments about wanting a house with a garden and her father's tired eyes after long work days had somehow become talking points in someone else's press conference. Tony appeared at his elbow. Dave, you need to see this. He was holding his phone, showing a local news website. The headline read, Local Mechanic Inspires Martinez Foundation, and beneath it was a photo that made David's blood freeze. It was a picture of him, Emma, and Sophia leaving Mama Rossetti's after one of their dinners. Someone had taken it from across the street, probably just a random photo that had seemed insignificant at the time. But now, with the context of the foundation announcement, it told a story. The wealthy heiress dining with the working-class father and his daughter. The caption read, Sources suggest that Sophia Martinez's inspiration for her new foundation came from personal encounters with local single-parent families. Jesus! David breathed. Daddy, what's wrong? Emma was looking between David and Tony, her anxiety growing. David realized that there was no going back now. Whether he wanted it or not, their story was out there. Emma would go to school tomorrow, and her classmates might ask her about being in the newspaper. Parents would look at them differently. Teachers would wonder if they needed special consideration, their privacy, their dignity, their ability to struggle quietly and privately. It was all gone, sacrificed on the altar of Sophia's good intentions. And the worst part was that David wasn't even sure she was wrong to start the foundation. Families like his did need help. Children like Emma did deserve better opportunities. But the fact that their personal story had become the poster child for those needs felt like a violation he couldn't forgive. "Daddy," Emma said quietly, "I think we should go home now." Home. Their one-room apartment that they could barely afford, where Emma slept on a mattress on the floor and David stayed awake at night, worrying about next month's rent. "Yeah, sweetheart," David said, taking her hand. "Let's go home." As they walked to their car, David couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed irrevocably. The quiet life he'd tried to build for Emma, the careful balance of dignity and survival he'd maintained. It was all different now. And somewhere across town, Sophia Martinez was probably in a boardroom, planning how to help families exactly like his, never understanding that sometimes the help hurt more than the struggling. The phone call started at 6 in the morning. David's ancient flip phone buzzed on the nightstand next to their air mattress, jolting him awake in the dim light of their studio apartment. Emma stirred beside him, her small body curled under the thin blanket they shared. "Hello?" David whispered, trying not to wake Emma. "Mr. Chen, this is Maria Santos from the Tribune. I'm hoping to speak with you about your relationship with Sophia Martinez and how it inspired her foundation." David hung up without a word. The phone immediately started ringing again. By 7:30, he'd received calls from 4 different news outlets, 2 radio stations, and someone claiming to represent a television talk show. Each call made his stomach tighten further, the reality of their situation becoming clearer with each intrusion. "Daddy, why does the phone keep ringing?" Emma asked sleepily, rubbing her eyes. "Wrong numbers, sweetheart. People looking for someone else." Emma accepted this explanation with the trusting nature of childhood, but David could see questions forming in her dark eyes. She was bright enough to sense that something had changed, even if she couldn't articulate what. The knock on their apartment door came at 8:15, just as David was helping Emma get ready for school. Through the peephole, he could see a young woman with a camera crew behind her, all crowded in the narrow hallway of their building. "Mr. Chen, I'm Jennifer Mills from Channel 4. We'd just like a few minutes to talk about the Martinez Foundation and how your story—" "We're not interested," David called through the door. "Sir, this could be a wonderful opportunity to bring attention to the struggles of single parents." "I said we're not interested." But they didn't leave. David could hear them talking in the hallway, could see the camera operator setting up equipment. He realized with growing dread that they were planning to wait him out. "Daddy, who are those people?" Emma whispered, standing on her tiptoes to look through the peephole. "Nobody important, Em. We're just going to wait here until they leave." But waiting meant missing school for Emma and work for David. It meant being prisoners in their own tiny apartment while strangers camped outside their door. David's phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed Mrs. Rodriguez's number. "David, mijo, there are people outside my building too. People with cameras asking about you and Emma. What's happening?" David closed his eyes, feeling the walls closing in. "It's a long story, Mrs. Rodriguez. Do you think you could watch Emma today? I don't want to take her out with those people around." "Of course, but David, what—" "I'll explain later, I promise." Getting Emma to Mrs. Rodriguez required sneaking out the back exit of their building and taking a circuitous route through the alley. Even then, David spotted a news van parked on the corner, its occupants scanning the street with professional patience. "This feels like hide and seek," Emma said as they ducked behind a dumpster. "But not the fun kind." "I know, sweetheart. It'll be over soon." But even as he said it, David knew he was lying. The news cycle might move on eventually, but the damage was already done. Their quiet anonymity was gone forever. At Murphy's garage, David hoped to find refuge in the familiar routine of work. Instead, he found Tony waiting for him, with a grim expression and a folded newspaper. "We need to talk," Tony said without preamble. The newspaper was folded to reveal a follow-up article about the Martinez Foundation, this one with a larger photo of David, Emma, and Sophia at the charity gala. The headline read, "The Mechanic and the Heiress, a Modern Fairy Tale." David skimmed the article, his stomach sinking with each paragraph. David Chen, 35, works at Murphy's Garage in the industrial district, earning minimum wage while raising his 7-year-old daughter, Emma, alone. According to sources, Chen and Martinez met when her car broke down outside his workplace late one evening. "It's like something out of a movie," said one witness who observed the unlikely trio at several local restaurants. You could see that the little girl just adored Sophia, and there was definitely chemistry between the adults. The article went on to speculate about the nature of their relationship, painting their story as a romantic narrative between people from different worlds. It mentioned Emma's intelligence, David's dedication as a father, and Sophia's obvious affection for both of them. "Jesus Christ," David muttered. "It gets worse," Tony said, flipping to an inside page. "Look at this." The inside spread featured a larger article titled, "Single Fathers in America, Heroes or Victims," with David's story as the centerpiece. It included quotes from education experts, child psychologists, and social workers, all using Emma and David as a case study for broader societal issues. Cases like Mr. Chen's highlight the impossible choices facing single parents, said Dr. Patricia Williams, a family counselor. When a parent has to choose between working to pay rent and staying home with a sick child, society has failed both the parent and the child. "They're talking about us like we're specimens in a lab," David said, his voice hollow. "Dave, I'm getting calls," Tony said quietly. "Reporters wanting to interview me about what kind of employee you are. People asking if I knew about your relationship with Martinez. This is affecting my business." David looked up sharply. "Tony, I never asked for any of this. I know you didn't, but it's happening anyway." Tony's voice was sympathetic but firm. "I've got 3 other employees, Dave. I can't have news vans parked outside my shop every day. I can't have reporters harassing my customers." The implication was clear, even though Tony was too kind to say it directly. David's presence was becoming a liability. "I understand," David said quietly. "I'm not firing you," Tony said quickly. "But maybe you should take some time off. Let this die down. When the media moves on to the next story, you can come back." "How long?" Tony shrugged helplessly. "I don't know, kid. How long do these things usually last?" David had no idea. He'd never been at the center of a news story before. He'd never had his private life dissected for public consumption. Never had strangers analyzing his parenting choices and financial struggles as if they were characters in a soap opera. "Take care of yourself, Dave. Take care of Emma, and when this is over, we'll figure out what comes next." David cleaned out his locker with mechanical precision, his mind numb with the realization that he'd just lost his job. Not because of anything he'd done wrong, but because his association with Sophia Martinez had made him a news story. The drive back to pick up Emma was a blur of radio news reports and speculation. David switched between stations, but everyone seemed to be discussing the Martinez Foundation story. On one talk radio show, callers were debating whether rich people like Sophia were genuine in their philanthropic efforts or just buying good publicity. "I think it's sweet," one caller said. "A successful woman falls for a working-class guy and starts a foundation to help people like him." "It's patronizing," another caller argued. "She's turning his poverty into her pet project. It's poverty tourism for the wealthy." David turned off the radio, unable to listen anymore. Both callers were wrong, but they were also somehow right. The truth was more complicated than either narrative allowed for. At Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment, David found Emma sitting at the kitchen table with a coloring book. But she wasn't coloring. She was just staring at the page, her usual enthusiasm completely absent. "How was she today?" David asked. Mrs. Rodriguez pulled him aside, speaking in a low voice. "Confused, mijo. She keeps asking why people want to take her picture, why strangers know her name. A reporter called here, asking to speak with her." "Someone called here asking to speak with Emma?" "I hung up immediately, but David..." Mrs. Rodriguez's face was creased with worry. "This is not good for a little girl. This attention, these questions about her life." David knelt beside Emma's chair. "Hey, sweetheart, how are you feeling?" Emma looked up at him with eyes that seemed older than they had just days before. "Daddy, did I do something wrong? Did we do something wrong?" "No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong." "Anything. Neither did I." Then why are people talking about us on TV? Mrs. Rodriguez's neighbor said she saw us on the news. David felt something break inside his chest. Emma shouldn't have to deal with this. She shouldn't have to understand why her private life had become public entertainment. Sometimes when grown-ups disagree, it becomes a big story. But it's not about you, Emma. You're perfect just the way you are. Is Sophia in trouble? Is that why people are asking about her? The innocence in the question nearly destroyed him. Despite everything, Emma was still worried about Sophia, still thinking of her as family. Sophia is fine, sweetheart. She has people who help her with things like this. But we don't? The question hung in the air, highlighting the fundamental inequality of their situation. Sophia had publicists, lawyers, security teams to shield her from unwanted attention. David had a 7-year-old daughter, a lost job, and $37 in his wallet. We have each other, David said finally. That's all we need. But as they walked to their car, David spotted the news van still parked on their street. The reporter from that morning was leaning against the vehicle, clearly waiting for them to return. When she saw them, she started walking in their direction. Mr. Chen, just a few questions. David grabbed Emma's hand and hurried toward their building's back entrance. But Emma had already seen the woman with the microphone, the camera operator following behind. Daddy, is that lady going to ask us questions? We're not talking to her, Em. We're just going home. But why doesn't she want to talk to us? What did we do? The irony was lost on Emma. She was simultaneously worried about why strangers wanted to talk to them and why they didn't want to talk to strangers. In her 7-year-old mind, both situations felt like punishment for some unknown transgression. Their apartment felt smaller than ever as they sat on the air mattress, sharing a dinner of canned soup and crackers. Emma picked at her food, her usual appetite gone. Daddy, are we going to be okay? The question every parent dreads, the one that cuts straight to the heart of every fear and uncertainty. David looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw the weight she was carrying. The confusion, the anxiety, the sense that their safe, small world had been invaded by forces beyond their control. Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be okay. Promise? David thought about his lost job, their tiny savings account, the reporters outside their building, the calls that wouldn't stop coming. He thought about the rent that was due in 2 weeks and the groceries they needed, and the fact that their story was now public property. I promise, he said. Because what else could he say? Because Emma needed to believe it, even if he couldn't. That night, after Emma had finally fallen asleep, David sat by their small window and watched the street below. The news van was gone, but he knew it would be back. Tomorrow would bring more calls, more questions, more strangers who thought they understood his life based on newspaper articles and television reports. His phone buzzed with a text message. For a wild moment, his heart leaped, thinking it might be Sophia. But it was another reporter, this one offering money for an exclusive interview. Mr. Chen, we'd like to offer you $5,000 for a sit-down interview about your relationship with Sophia Martinez. This is an opportunity to tell your side of the story. $5,000. More money than David had seen in one place since, maybe ever. Enough to cover rent for months, to take Emma to a real doctor, to buy her clothes that fit properly and toys that weren't from thrift stores. All he had to do was sell their story, turn their private pain into public entertainment, confirm what everyone already suspected about their relationship with Sophia. David stared at the message for a long time, his thumb hovering over the reply button. $5,000 for one interview. How many interviews would it take to change their lives completely? How much was their privacy worth when they couldn't afford privacy anyway? He thought about Emma's question earlier. Are we going to be okay? Maybe this was how they could be okay. Maybe this was the universe's twisted way of giving them a way out of poverty. Turn their pain into profit, their struggle into a storyline. David closed his phone without responding and pulled the thin blanket over his sleeping daughter. Some things weren't for sale, no matter how desperately you needed the money. But as he lay there in the dark, listening to Emma's steady breathing and the sounds of the city outside their window, David couldn't shake the feeling that he was drowning, that every choice he made seemed to lead to deeper water, and that somewhere out there, Sophia Martinez was sleeping in a mansion, surrounded by comfort and security, probably unaware that her good intentions had turned his life upside down. The next morning would bring more calls, more questions, more impossible choices. But tonight, in the quiet darkness of their tiny apartment, David held his daughter close and tried to believe in his own promise that everything would be okay, even though he had no idea how that could possibly be true. 5 days had passed since David lost his job, and their small savings had dwindled to $18.43. Emma sat cross-legged on their air mattress, quietly drawing pictures while David stared at his laptop screen, scrolling through job listings with growing desperation. Every potential employer who Googled his name would find dozens of articles about the mechanic who inspired the Martinez Foundation. Who wanted to hire someone who came with that kind of media baggage? The phone calls from reporters had finally stopped, but the damage was done. Their story had become part of the public record, their private struggles now fodder for think pieces about inequality, single parenthood, and class differences in America. Emma looked up from her drawing. "Daddy, Mrs. Rodriguez called. She said there's something you need to see." David's heart sank. More media coverage, probably. "What kind of something?" "She said it's on the computer, about the foundation lady." The foundation lady. That's what Emma had started calling Sophia, as if using her name would make the hurt too real. David opened a new browser tab and searched for recent news about Sophia Martinez. What he found made his breath catch. The headline read, "Martinez heiress under fire. Foundation questioned amid personal scandal." The article was brutal. Questions are mounting about Sophia Martinez's recently announced $50 million foundation for single-parent families after revelations about her personal relationship with a local mechanic and his young daughter. Critics are calling the foundation a vanity project, designed to cover up Martinez's exploitation of working-class families for publicity. "This isn't philanthropy," said Dr. Margaret Thornton, a professor of social work at the State University. "This is a wealthy woman using real people's struggles to burnish her public image." The fact that she launched this foundation immediately after befriending a struggling single father raises serious ethical questions. David's stomach churned as he read further. The Martinez Holdings Board of Directors is reportedly reconsidering the foundation's funding after several major investors expressed concerns about the company's leadership. When the CEO's personal life becomes a liability for shareholders, action must be taken, said an unnamed board member. Martinez has not responded to requests for comment, but sources close to the family business suggest she may be facing pressure to step down from her role as CEO. Emma crawled over to sit beside David, studying his face with the intuitive concern that children develop when their world feels unstable. "You look scared, Daddy." "I'm not scared, sweetheart, just thinking." But David was scared, not for himself. He'd lost jobs before, had weathered financial crises and public humiliation. He was scared because the article made it clear that Sophia was paying a price for their association, and despite his anger about the foundation, despite feeling betrayed and exploited, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was wrong. Emma pointed to Sophia's photo on the laptop screen. "She looks sad." David studied the image. It was a recent photo, probably taken outside Martinez Holdings' corporate headquarters. Sophia looked exhausted, her usual poise replaced by visible strain. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her smile seemed forced. "Yeah, Em, she does look sad. Maybe we should call her." The suggestion hit David like a physical blow. "Emma? She was nice to us, Daddy, remember? She bought me pizza and helped me color, and she said I was smart. Even if grown-ups have fights, we should still be nice to people who were nice to us." David closed the laptop, overwhelmed by his daughter's simple wisdom. Emma was right. Whatever had happened between him and Sophia, whatever mistakes had been made, Sophia had shown them genuine kindness. She'd made Emma laugh, had treated them both with respect and warmth. And now she was facing professional ruin, partly because of their story. David's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mr. Chen, this is Patricia Wells, Sophia Martinez's assistant. Ms. Martinez would like to speak with you if you're willing. She asked me to tell you that she understands if you don't want to hear from her, but she hopes you'll give her a chance to explain. She's not asking as CEO of Martinez Holdings. She's asking as someone who cares about you and Emma." David stared at the message for a long time. Part of him wanted to delete it, to maintain the wall of anger and hurt that had protected him over the past week. But another part, the part that remembered Sophia's genuine laughter at Emma's jokes, her careful attention to his daughter's feelings, the loneliness he'd recognized in her voice, that part wanted to hear what she had to say. "Daddy?" Emma had been watching him read. "Is that from the foundation lady?" "Her assistant. Sophia wants to talk to us." Emma's face lit up with hope. "Can we see her? Please?" David thought about the news article, about Sophia facing professional consequences for their association. Whatever mistakes she'd made, she didn't deserve to lose everything because she'd tried to help families like his. "I'll call her back," David said finally. An hour later, David found himself sitting in his Honda outside Riverside Park, Emma beside him in the passenger seat. Sophia had suggested they meet somewhere public but private, somewhere they could talk without reporters or cameras. The park was mostly empty on a weekday afternoon, just a few joggers and dog walkers enjoying the mild weather. Sophia arrived in a modest sedan instead of her usual BMW, wearing jeans and a simple sweater that made her look younger and more vulnerable than David remembered. She approached their car slowly, as if afraid they might drive away. Emma was out of the car and running towards Sophia before David could stop her. "Sophia, I missed you." David watched as Sophia dropped to her knees and wrapped Emma in a fierce hug, her eyes filling with tears. For a moment, all the anger and hurt of the past week faded, replaced by the simple recognition that these two people loved each other. "I missed you too, sweetheart," Sophia whispered into Emma's hair. "So much." David got out of the car slowly, his emotions warring between protectiveness and relief. Sophia looked up at him over Emma's head, and he could see the exhaustion in her face, the weight she'd been carrying. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. They found a picnic table away from the main path, Emma settling between them as if this was the most natural thing in the world. David noticed that Sophia looked thinner than she had just a week ago, as if the stress of recent events had literally worn her down. "I saw the news," David said without preamble, "about the board questioning your leadership." Sophia's smile was bitter. "News travels fast. Yes, there are concerns about my judgment, about whether my personal decisions have compromised my ability to lead the company effectively. Because of us. Because of me," Sophia corrected firmly. "Because of choices I made, mistakes I made. This isn't your fault, David." Emma looked between them, clearly trying to understand the conversation. "Are you in trouble because you're our friend?" Sophia's expression softened as she focused on Emma. "Sometimes grown-ups make things more complicated than they need to be, sweetheart. But being your friend could never be trouble. Being your friend has been the best part of my life." "Then why did you and Daddy fight?" David started to intervene, but Sophia held up a gentle hand. "Because I did something that hurt your daddy's feelings, and I didn't explain it the right way. Sometimes when we care about people, we want to help them so much that we don't ask what kind of help they actually want." Emma nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense. "Like when I clean my room without being asked, but I put things in the wrong places?" "Exactly like that," Sophia said, smiling genuinely for the first time since she'd arrived. "I wanted to help, but I should have asked your daddy first." David felt something loosen in his chest. Sophia's explanation was simple but honest, and it acknowledged his feelings without making excuses. "The foundation," he said quietly. "Was it really because of us?" Sophia was quiet for a moment, watching Emma trace patterns on the picnic table with her finger. "Yes and no. I'd been thinking about philanthropy for years, but I never knew how to connect with the causes I wanted to support. Everything felt so abstract. Then I met you two, and suddenly it wasn't abstract anymore. I saw what single parents actually go through, what children like Emma need and deserve." She turned to face David directly. "But I should have talked to you first. I should have asked how you felt about your story inspiring something public. I was so excited about the possibility of helping that I forgot the most important rule of actually helping people, which is, ask them what they need instead of assuming you know." David absorbed this, recognizing the truth in it. The press conference, the quotes about fathers going without meals. "I was trying to make people understand that single parents are heroes, not victims." But I realize now that I used your private struggles to make a public point, and that wasn't fair to you or Emma. Emma looked up suddenly. Are you going to stop the foundation? The question surprised both adults. Sophia glanced at David before answering. I don't know, sweetheart. That depends on a lot of things. But if you stop it, then other kids like me won't get help, right? David felt his throat tighten. Even at 7, Emma understood the larger implications of the situation. There might be other ways to help, Sophia said carefully. But not as good as your way, Emma said with the blunt honesty of childhood. You have lots of money, so you can help lots of kids. That's good, right? Even if it makes Daddy sad. David stared at his daughter, struck by her ability to see past the personal drama to the bigger picture. Emma understood something that he'd been too hurt and angry to recognize. The foundation could actually help families like theirs, regardless of how it had started. Emma's right, he said slowly. The foundation, it could really help people. Sophia's eyes widened in surprise. David, I was so angry about feeling exploited that I forgot what you were actually trying to do. And now, because of our fight, because of the media attention, families who need help might not get it. The board wants me to shelve the foundation indefinitely, Sophia admitted. They're worried about the controversy, about associating the Martinez name with what they see as a public relations disaster. What do you want to do? Sophia looked at Emma, then back at David. I want to help families like yours, but I want to do it the right way this time, with input from people who actually know what it's like to struggle, not just rich people who think they understand poverty. David felt something shift inside him, a recognition that he'd been so focused on protecting his pride that he'd missed an opportunity to actually improve Emma's future. What if we started over? He said suddenly. Both Sophia and Emma looked at him in surprise. What if we forget about the media circus and the board meetings and all the ways this got messed up, and we just focus on what matters, helping kids like Emma have better opportunities? Sophia's eyes filled with tears. You'd be willing to work with me on this? After everything? Not for you, David said honestly. For Emma. For all the kids who are sitting in cars tonight because their parents can't make rent. For all the 7-year-olds who have to worry about whether their daddies are okay. Emma bounced excitedly. Does this mean you're friends again? David looked at Sophia, seeing her clearly for the first time since the charity gala. She wasn't the calculating heiress he'd imagined in his anger, or the naive rich girl playing at charity. She was someone who had tried to help and had made mistakes, but whose heart was in the right place. Yeah, Em, he said softly. I think we're friends again. As they walked back toward their cars, Emma skipping ahead of them, Sophia touched David's arm gently. I know I have a lot to make up for. The way I handled everything, the assumptions I made. I want to do better. We both want to do better, David replied. For Emma, for all the kids who deserve better than what we went through. Looking back, David would remember this afternoon as the moment when everything truly began to change. Not because a wealthy woman decided to help a poor family, but because two people who cared about a little girl decided to work together to create something larger than their individual struggles. For the first time in weeks, David felt hope. 3 weeks after their reconciliation in the park, David stood outside the gleaming headquarters of Martinez Holdings, his palms sweating despite the cool morning air. Today was the day Sophia would present her revised foundation proposal to the board of directors, and she'd asked him to be there, not as a case study or inspiration, but as a partner in the foundation's development. Emma squeezed his hand as they walked through the marble lobby. She was wearing her best dress, the navy blue one from the charity gala, and had insisted on coming to help Sophia with the important meeting. Are you nervous, Daddy? Emma whispered as they rode the elevator to the 32nd floor. A little, David admitted, but good nervous, like when you're about to do something that matters. The elevator doors opened to reveal a reception area that screamed corporate power, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, modern art on the walls, furniture that probably cost more than David made in a year. But what caught his attention was Sophia, standing near the windows in a sharp charcoal suit, looking every inch the CEO she was born to be. She turned when she heard the elevator, and her face lit up when she saw them. You came, she said, relief evident in her voice. We said we would, David replied. Though I have to admit, this place is a little intimidating. Wait until you meet the board, Sophia said with a wry smile. Intimidating doesn't begin to cover it. Emma tugged on Sophia's jacket. Are they mean people? Not mean exactly, just very focused on money and business. They're not used to thinking about helping people like your daddy and me want to help. Then we'll have to show them, Emma said, with the confidence that only 7-year-olds possessed. Sophia's assistant, Patricia, appeared with a tablet and a nervous expression. Ms. Martinez, the board is ready for you. I should mention that Mr. Harrison called an emergency session yesterday. All 12 members will be present. Sophia's face tightened. Robert Harrison was the board member who'd been most vocal about his opposition to the foundation, arguing that it was a waste of company resources and a distraction from Martinez Holdings' core business. All 12, Sophia repeated. He's really going for the kill shot. What does that mean? David asked. It means he's gathered enough support to potentially remove me as CEO if the vote goes against me today. David felt a chill run down his spine. Sophia, maybe we should... No, she said firmly. This is exactly why we need to do this. If I back down now, if I let fear of losing my position stop me from doing what's right, then I don't deserve to lead this company anyway. The boardroom was a study in corporate intimidation, a massive oval table surrounded by leather chairs, with floor-to-ceiling windows providing a commanding view of the city. 12 board members were already seated, their faces ranging from curious to openly hostile. David recognized several of them from news articles and society pages, titans of industry, political figures, old money families who'd been part of the Martinez Holdings empire for generations. These were people who made decisions affecting thousands of jobs and millions of dollars, and now Emma and David were walking into their world. Ladies and gentlemen, Sophia began, her voice steady and professional, thank you for agreeing to this special session. As you know, I'm here to present a revised proposal for the Future Builders Foundation, taking into account the concerns raised at our last meeting. Robert Harrison, a silver-haired man in his 60s, leaned back in his chair with obvious skepticism. Ms. Martinez, before we begin, I think we need to address the elephant in the room. The media circus surrounding this foundation has become a liability for our company. Our stock price has dropped 3% since the announcement, and we've had calls from major clients expressing concern about our leadership's judgment. Mr. Harrison, Sophia replied calmly, short-term market fluctuations. This isn't about short-term anything, Harrison interrupted. This is about a CEO who allowed her personal relationships to cloud her business judgment. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our shareholders, not to your charitable impulses. David felt heat rise in his cheeks. The dismissive way Harrison said charitable impulses made it clear what he thought of helping families like David's. Emma, who had been sitting quietly beside David, suddenly spoke up. Excuse me, sir? The boardroom fell silent. 12 powerful adults turned to stare at a 7-year-old who had just interrupted a corporate meeting with the politeness of someone asking for directions. Emma, David started to say, but Sophia held up a gentle hand. Yes, sweetheart, Sophia said. Did you have something to say? Emma stood up with the gravity of someone making an important announcement. I think you don't understand what Sophia is trying to do. Harrison's eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline. I beg your pardon? You said she has bad judgment because she wants to help kids like me. But that's not bad judgment. That's being a good person. A ripple of surprise went around the table. Several board members were fighting smiles, while others looked genuinely shocked that a child was addressing them directly. Emma, David whispered, maybe you should... No, Daddy, they need to understand. Emma turned back to the board with the fearlessness that came from not knowing she should be intimidated. My daddy works really hard, but sometimes we don't have enough money for things. That's not because Daddy is bad at his job. He's the best car fixer in the whole world. It's because sometimes life is hard for regular people. She paused, looking directly at Harrison. Sophia doesn't want to help us because it makes her look good. She wants to help us because she loves us. And when someone loves you, they want good things to happen to you. The boardroom was completely silent. David felt tears prick his eyes as he watched his daughter, with no preparation or coaching, cut straight to the heart of what the foundation was really about. Furthermore, Emma continued, using a word she'd clearly learned from listening to adult conversations, if you have lots of money like you do, and you don't help kids who need help. That seems like bad judgment to me." Harrison's face had gone through several color changes during Emma's speech. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Young lady, business decisions are more complicated than—" "Are they?" Emma asked with genuine curiosity. "Because it seems simple to me. You have money, kids need help. You help them. What's complicated about that?" Another board member, an elderly woman named Catherine Westbrook, leaned forward with interest. "Emma, isn't it? Can you tell us more about how this foundation would help children like you?" Emma nodded seriously. "Well, sometimes kids can't go to good schools because their mommies or daddies can't afford it. And sometimes kids are really smart, but they can't learn music or art or computers because those things cost money. And sometimes," her voice grew smaller, "sometimes kids worry about whether their daddies are okay because they work so hard and they're so tired." She looked around the table, making eye contact with each board member. "If you help kids like me, we can learn more things, and maybe someday we can help other kids too. It's like planting seeds that grow into trees that make more seeds." Catherine Westbrook was nodding slowly. "That's a very sophisticated way to think about philanthropy, Emma." "I don't know what that word means," Emma admitted, "but I know what helping means." David realized that something had shifted in the room. The board members who had entered with skepticism were now looking at Emma with something approaching respect. She had done what Sophia's carefully prepared presentation might not have been able to do. She had made the need for the foundation real and immediate. Sophia stood up, and David could see that she was fighting back tears. "Emma has just demonstrated exactly why this foundation matters. Not because it will make us look good or fulfill some obligation to society, but because there are brilliant children out there who deserve every opportunity to reach their potential." She moved to the presentation screen, clicking to her first slide. "The revised foundation proposal addresses every concern raised in our previous meeting. We've established clear metrics for success, built-in accountability measures, and created a governance structure that includes input from the families we're trying to serve." As Sophia walked through the presentation, David noticed that the board members were paying attention in a way they hadn't before Emma spoke. They asked pointed questions, raised practical concerns, but the underlying hostility had largely evaporated. "The foundation will be funded entirely through Martinez Holdings' community investment budget," Sophia continued, "with additional funds raised through private donations and corporate partnerships. This ensures that our shareholders' primary interests are protected while still allowing us to make a meaningful impact." Harrison raised his hand. "Ms. Martinez, what guarantee do we have that this won't become another public relations nightmare?" Before Sophia could answer, Emma raised her small hand. "Can I answer that?" Sophia looked surprised but nodded. "Of course." Emma stood up again, and David marveled at his daughter's composure in front of these powerful strangers. "Mr. Harrison, if you do good things for good reasons, why would that be a nightmare? Maybe some people will say mean things, but people always say mean things about everything. That doesn't mean you should stop doing good things." She paused, tilting her head thoughtfully. "My daddy says that doing the right thing is sometimes hard, but that's what makes it worth doing. Maybe helping kids is hard for your company, but that's what would make it really special." Harrison stared at Emma for a long moment, then looked around the table at his fellow board members. Several of them were nodding, and David could see the calculus changing in real time. "I move to call for a vote," Catherine Westbrook said suddenly. "All in favor of approving the Future Builders Foundation as presented?" Hands began rising around the table. David held his breath as he counted. 1, 2, 3, 7 hands. A majority. "Motion carries," Catherine announced. "Ms. Martinez, your foundation is approved." The boardroom erupted in a mixture of congratulations and continued discussion about implementation details. But David was focused on Sophia, who had sunk into her chair with visible relief. Emma ran over to hug her. "You did it! You helped the kids!" "We did it," Sophia corrected, pulling Emma into her lap. "You were the one who made them understand." As the board members filed out, several stopped to shake David's hand or to tell Emma how impressed they were with her presentation. Harrison was among the last to leave, and he paused beside their small group. "Ms. Martinez," he said formally, "I owe you an apology. I allowed my concerns about publicity to overshadow the fundamental mission of this company, which has always been to build something lasting and meaningful. He turned to Emma with a slight smile. And, young lady, you taught an old businessman something important today. Sometimes the simplest questions are the most profound ones. After the boardroom cleared, the three of them sat in the executive conference room, looking out at the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I can't believe that actually worked, Sophia said, her voice still shaky with adrenaline. Emma was amazing, David said, pulling his daughter close. Where did you learn to talk to people like that? I just told them the truth, Emma said matter-of-factly. Grown-ups make things too complicated sometimes. Sophia laughed, a sound of pure joy and relief. She's absolutely right. We do make things too complicated. She turned to David, her expression growing serious. This is just the beginning, you know. Building this foundation, making it actually work, that's going to be the hard part. Good thing we have the best consultant in the business, David said, smiling down at Emma. The very best, Sophia agreed, reaching over to take Emma's hand. So, partner, what should we do first? Emma considered this with the gravity she brought to all important decisions. First, we should get pizza to celebrate. Then we should make a list of all the kids who need help. Then we should help them. David looked at Sophia and saw his own amazement reflected in her eyes. Somehow, against all odds, they had found their way to this moment, not just as friends who had overcome misunderstandings, but as partners in something larger than any of them could have imagined. Pizza it is, Sophia said solemnly, and then we change the world. As they walked out of Martinez Holdings together, Emma skipping between them, David felt something he hadn't experienced in years. The absolute certainty that everything was going to be okay, more than okay. They were going to build something beautiful together. 2 years later, David stood in the kitchen of their new house, watching through the window as Emma and Sophia worked together in the garden they had planted last spring. The sunflowers Emma had insisted on were now towering over both of them, their bright faces turned toward the afternoon sun like natural solar panels of joy. The house wasn't a mansion. It was a modest 3-bedroom craftsman in a working-class neighborhood that David could actually afford with his new salary as the Future Builders Foundation's Director of Family Services. But it had everything Emma had dreamed of during those long nights in their car. A big kitchen with a table for family dinners, Emma's own room with pink walls and a window for watching birds, and a workshop in the garage where David could still work on cars in his spare time. Daddy, come see. Emma's voice carried through the open window. The tomatoes are finally ready. David smiled and walked outside, joining his 2 favorite people in the garden that had become a symbol of everything good that had grown from their darkest moments. Emma was holding a perfect red tomato, her face glowing with pride. It's beautiful, sweetheart, David said, accepting the tomato with the reverence it deserved. You and Sophia have outdone yourselves. We make a good team, Sophia said, brushing dirt off her hands. She was wearing old jeans and one of David's work shirts, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, looking nothing like the corporate executive she'd been when they first met. She looked like home. The transformation in all their lives still amazed David. The Future Builders Foundation had become exactly what Emma had envisioned in the boardroom that day, a program that helped families without making them feel like charity cases. They had served over 3,000 families in 2 years, providing everything from educational scholarships to emergency assistance to job training programs. David's role had evolved from reluctant inspiration to active architect of the foundation's programs. His background as a single parent navigating the system had proven invaluable in designing services that actually met families' needs, rather than just checking boxes for donors. How many families are we interviewing this week? Sophia asked as they walked back toward the house. 15 for the new scholarship program, David replied, and I want Emma to sit in on a few of the interviews, if she's interested. Emma's face lit up. Really? I can help pick the kids who get help? You can help us understand what kids really need, David corrected gently. Your perspective is important. This had become one of the Foundation's most innovative features, including children in the decision-making process. Emma had become their unofficial youth advisor, helping design programs that actually appealed to kids rather than just their parents. Inside the house, the kitchen table was covered with application files, thank you letters from families, and photos from Foundation events. It was controlled chaos, but it was their chaos. The beautiful mess of building something meaningful together. Sophia's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and smiled. Miguel wants to know if we're still coming to dinner on Sunday. Miguel was Sophia's cousin, one of the first family members to embrace David and Emma into their extended clan. Sunday dinners at his house had become a weekly tradition, complete with cousins for Emma to play with, and the kind of loud, warm family gatherings that David had never experienced growing up. "Of course we're coming," Emma said indignantly. "Cousin Maria promised to teach me how to make her famous flan." David marveled at how naturally Emma had settled into having an extended family. She called Sophia's cousins cousin and Sophia's aunt Tia Rosa, and they treated her like she'd always been part of their family tree. "Speaking of family," Sophia said, her voice taking on a slightly nervous tone, "I have something I want to talk to you both about." David and Emma looked at her with identical expressions of curiosity. After 2 years together, they had learned to read Sophia's moods, and this one suggested something important was coming. "What is it?" Emma asked, settling into her chair at the kitchen table. Sophia took a deep breath and looked at David. "I've been thinking about this for months, and I know it's a big step, but I wondered, how would you both feel if I asked to adopt Emma?" The question hung in the air for a moment, unexpected and perfect at the same time. David felt his throat tighten with emotion as he looked at his daughter, who was staring at Sophia with wide eyes. "You want to be my real mom?" Emma whispered. "I want to be your everything, Mom," Sophia said softly. "Your daddy will always be your daddy. Nothing changes that. But I love you so much, and I want to make it official that we're a family." Emma launched herself out of her chair and into Sophia's arms. "Yes, yes, yes, yes. Can we do it right now?" David wiped away tears he didn't realize had started falling. It's a little more complicated than that. There are legal steps." "But we can do it?" Emma asked, looking between her two parents with desperate hope. "If Daddy agrees," Sophia said, her eyes meeting David's across the table. David thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment, the broken-down car that had changed everything, the misunderstandings and hurt feelings they'd worked through, the foundation they'd built together, the quiet nights when Sophia had read Emma bedtime stories while David finished laundry, or the mornings when she'd helped Emma with math homework while David made breakfast. They'd been a family in every way that mattered for months now. Making it legal felt like the most natural thing in the world. "I can't think of anything I'd want more," David said finally. Emma squealed with delight and ran to hug him. "Daddy, we're going to be a real family." "We already are a real family, sweetheart," David said, pulling both Emma and Sophia into a group hug. "Now, we're just going to make it official." 6 months later, they stood in a courthouse downtown, surrounded by friends and family who had come to witness Emma's adoption. Mrs. Rodriguez was there, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Tony and several mechanics from Murphy's garage had closed the shop early to attend. Miguel and the extended Martinez family filled 2 rows of seats. Even Catherine Westbrook from the Martinez Holdings Board had come, bringing a beautiful children's book about families as a gift. "This is the easy part," Judge Patricia Chen, no relation to David despite sharing a last name, said with a warm smile. "After today, Emma Chen will officially become Emma Chen Martinez, with 2 legal parents who love her very much." The ceremony was simple but profound. When it was over, Emma was officially part of 2 families who had chosen each other through love rather than biology. "How does it feel to be Emma Chen Martinez?" David asked as they walked out of the courthouse. "It feels like everything is exactly how it's supposed to be," Emma said solemnly. That evening, they celebrated at Mama Rossetti's, the same restaurant where they had shared their first meal together as an unlikely trio. The owner, Mrs. Rossetti, had prepared a special cake with "Welcome to the Family" written in purple frosting, Emma's favorite color. "You know," Sophia said as they shared the cake, "I never thanked you properly." "For what?" David asked. "For being brave enough to trust me again after I messed everything up so badly." "You didn't mess everything up," David said. "You just took a detour to get where we needed to be." Emma, who had been quietly eating her cake, suddenly looked up. "Can I say something important?" "Always," Sophia and David said in unison. Emma stood up with the gravity she brought to all serious moments. "I think sometimes the best families are the ones you choose, not the ones you're born with." And I think God, or the universe, or whoever is in charge of good things happening, made Sophia's car break down right when we needed her most. She paused, looking at both her parents with the wisdom that seemed far beyond her 9 years. And I think maybe we were exactly what she needed too, even if she didn't know it yet. David felt his heart swell with pride and love. Emma had understood something that had taken him months to figure out. That their story wasn't about a rich woman rescuing a poor family. It was about 3 people who had needed each other, finding their way to becoming whole. "You're absolutely right, sweetheart," Sophia said, her voice thick with emotion. "I needed you both more than I ever knew." As they drove home that night, Emma asleep in the back seat clutching her adoption certificate, David reached over and took Sophia's hand. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. "About which part?" "Any of it. The foundation, the media circus, taking on a ready-made family, giving up your bachelor lifestyle for PTA meetings and soccer practices." Sophia was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. "You know what I regret?" "What?" "I regret that it took me 34 years to understand what family really means. I regret all the years I spent thinking success was measured in profit margins instead of bedtime stories. I regret waiting so long to find you both." She squeezed his hand. "But I don't regret a single moment since then. Not the fights, not the complications, not the reporters, not the board meetings. All of it led us here." David brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Here is pretty perfect." "Here is everything," Sophia agreed. 5 years after that courthouse ceremony, the Future Builders Foundation had grown into a national model for family-centered philanthropy. Emma, now 14 and serving as the foundation's official youth advisory board chair, had testified before Congress about the importance of including children's voices in programs designed to help them. David had earned his bachelor's degree in social work through night classes, while Sophia had stepped back from day-to-day operations at Martinez Holdings to focus full-time on the foundation. They'd gotten married in their backyard garden, surrounded by sunflowers and the laughter of children whose lives had been touched by their work. But more than any professional success, more than any award or recognition, what mattered most to David was the quiet moment every evening when their family gathered around the kitchen table. Emma would share stories from school, Sophia would talk about the new families they were helping, and David would look around at their life, messy, busy, full of love, and know that sometimes the most broken things could be rebuilt into something beautiful. "Daddy," Emma said one evening as they cleaned up after dinner, "do you ever think about how different our lives would be if Sophia's car hadn't broken down that night?" David paused in loading the dishwasher, considering the question. "Sometimes. Do you?" "Yeah, and I think maybe it wasn't really an accident. I think maybe some things are supposed to happen, even when they seem impossible." She was right, David realized. The odds of Sophia's car breaking down at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right place, when exactly the right people needed each other most, it did seem too perfect to be purely coincidental. "You know what I think?" he said, pulling Emma into a hug. "What?" "I think you're the smartest kid I know. And I think we're the luckiest family in the world." "The very luckiest," Emma agreed. As the sun set through their kitchen window, painting everything in golden light, David Chen Martinez looked around at his life and felt nothing but gratitude. Sometimes the most extraordinary families were born from the most ordinary moments. Sometimes love appeared disguised as a broken radiator hose and a desperate need for help. And sometimes, if you were very lucky and very brave, you got to build something beautiful from the pieces of what you thought was broken beyond repair. Their story hadn't ended with a wedding, or even with an adoption. It continued every day in the small moments that make a family. Emma's laughter echoing through the house, Sophia's hand in his as they fell asleep. The knowledge that tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to love each other well. It was an ordinary miracle, the kind that happened when people chose to believe in second chances, and the possibility that broken things could be made whole again. And in the garden outside their kitchen window, the sunflowers continued to grow, their faces turned always toward the light.